Wolfpack, what is going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Here with your Week 5 waiver wire pickups, the top guys you need to add. And I'll say it right from the jump. This is by far the best waiver wire we have seen so far this year. A few very, very exciting talents. Perhaps none that I would blow every single cent on, but definitely a handful of worth the 30 to 50% waiver wire FAAB. So definitely come on in. Let's dive into what you need to add. As always, we'll go position by position, the top guys at each one. I'll tell you guys the order of those top 15 or so by the end of the stream. We'll as always get into our favorite defensive streamers and then the cut list. And it's on to all of your questions. Who should I cut? Who should I add? All that good stuff to customize the help for your team. That's why we like to do these live, is to help you guys out there. So thank you again so much, whether you're live with us here or catching the replay. If you enjoy what you hear at any point, the thumbs up button really does help us grow. We're up to 4,100, grew 100 new subscribers last week. You love to see it, and we'd love to keep getting new bodies in here. So if you enjoy it, that thumbs up, and of course, we'd love to have you subscribe so you're here when we go live 3 to 4 other times throughout the week. Alrighty, guys, let's dive in, starting at the top with quarterbacks, and a repeat from last week, but I imagine this is going to be the last time we see available in 7% of the leagues. Justin Fields still only at 32% rostered. We just see the first time in week 4 rather, that the Steelers are in a trailing game script. And what ends up happening for Justin Fields? 312 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, in addition to 10 rushes over 50 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground as well. Fields ends up going for 32 fantasy points, is the QB1 of week 4. Amazing performance. And that was so impressive to see. Again, the first time we saw them playing from behind, we now recognize that a lot of talk. Now these are the Steelers, and they have this elite defense. Is he ever Fields going to have that upside that we saw in Chicago, where he could break a week for you, that he could swing everything? We just saw it this week. At minimum, whether it's to block your opponents, whether you need him, he should not be on waiver wires at this point. He's 4th in the league in adjusted completion percentage too, so he's getting it down as a passer. But of course, as you guys know, the real value here comes from the ground points. 9.3 rush attempts per game, and that's because he's got the 4th highest designed rush rate. Nearly 20% of the Steelers' runs going to him designed, and 10% of these scrambles in general. He's running at a huge clip. And as we covered last week, and we'll cover every single week, that Konami code is so, so valuable for your fantasy goodness here. Ultimately, since 2000, there have been 41 quarterbacks to play 12-plus games and average 5.5 rushes per game. And again, he's at 9.3 rushes per game. Of these quarterbacks, 34 have finished as top 12 QBs. That's 83% of them. And 24 have finished as top 6. That's 59% of the QBs since 2000 to get 5.5 rush attempts in. Again, Fields is at 9.3, nearly double that amount. No quarterbacks ever posted 750 rush yards and finished below 9th in fantasy points. And Fields is on pace to crush that. And 15 of 16 QBs with 125 rush attempts have finished inside the top 12 across the last decade. It is such a cheat code, especially, again, with Fields passing as well as he is right now. There's no doubt about it. He is the top quarterback to pick up this week. Although I am seeing right now Geno Smith on a lot of waiver wires. And that's kind of the question, is which of these guys do you prefer, Wolf? Geno Smith or Justin Fields? Let's talk about the case for Geno Smith. He's been a top 12 quarterback in 3 of 4 games this year. That's better than Justin Fields, who's done that only half the time. Quarterback 8 right now on the season for Geno Smith. The Ryan Grubb attack is the real deal. 9th in the league with 25.8 points per game. And ultimately, we've now seen Geno throw for 395 last game out and a touchdown. And 3 touchdowns did go to Kenneth Walker on the ground, but that could very easily flip any given week. Just in general, how explosive this attack looks, how accurate Geno's looking. He's also running more than ever before. 30-plus rush yards in 2 of 4 games, 4-plus carries in 3 of 4 games. He is absolutely slinging. And now he gets a Giants team. They're not the best of matchups, 20th in fantasy points. It's still nothing intimidating. It's the Giants, though. Let's be real with it. So who do you prefer? Well, I also then look at the Fields matchup here. and he gets Dallas, the 11th most points to quarterbacks, despite facing Watson, Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, and then, of course, Lamar Jackson, who had a 20-point day against them. But only one of those guys was probably inside your top 20 preseason QBs. And Carr, sure, he had his big moments, but he's kind of coming back down to earth as well. So I think this Dallas defense is ripe to get run on. They certainly are the worst run D to running backs, and that would obviously translate to Fields and those leg points. Plus, it's that matchup where they might have to get to the air more often for Justin Fields, more scrambles as a result, too, given Dallas has one of the more explosive attacks in the league. So if you just need one quarterback for 1 week, I do think it's Justin Fields. For the season long, if you're desperate and you just need a guy that you want stability around, it probably is Geno, just because, again, there is Russell Wilson looming, and I know he's horrible and they should never go back to him, but you can see it. So it depends on what you want, and I do think Geno Smith is a better bet to give you a surefire 18-ish points this week and just in general from week to week the rest of the season. I still can't turn down that ceiling, though, of Justin Fields with that Konami upside. It is just too much to pass up. He's got truly top 5 rest of season upside at the position, and at minimum, again, Justin Fields versus Geno Smith. Neither of these guys should be out there on waivers at all. I think Fields is the one that you'd be more scared to face, the guy that I would add, regardless of what your situation is. All right, well, we're going to now move to the running back position. Those are the only 2 quarterbacks I consider worth talking about, but that's also with Darnold gone and anything like that. So if there are some guys looming on the waiver wire, Andy Dalton's still really interesting. Another solid day, but I don't love the Bears matchup for him this coming week. But still, I have a really deep, a 16-team league, and I have Jalen Hurts on bye. It's looking like it's going to be Andy Dalton or Bo Nix. Give me Andy Dalton 10 out of 10 times. So if you are desperate in those type of situations, please do let me know. We'd be more than happy to help answer some more quarterback questions. We're now turn our attention to the running back position, but already 200 of you here in the first 7 minutes. Love to see it. I thank you so much for being here, whether you're on Twitter, whether you're on YouTube, that quick like button, the thumbs up button, any retweet shares that help us get out to more people. I'm getting thousands of people in these streams, and it's just so awesome to see the growth and so appreciated to have you guys all here. Let's continue forward, though, with the running back position. The top waiver wire running back of the week for me is Kareem Hunt. And I'm getting a lot of pushback on Twitter so far about this, but let's dive into my take. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments here as well. We see Carson Steele. He starts the game, fumbles his second carry, and from that point on, Steele had just 19% of the snaps in this game. Kareem Hunt takes over for 43% of the snaps and a dominant 58% rush share and 8% target share. All 3 of those leading the team in those peripherals, those usage. He racks up 10.5 PPR fantasy points with 14 carries for 69 yards, a nice near 5 yards per clip on that. He finishes the running back 21 on the week. Now, Pirine was still involved, 41% of the snaps, 22% rushes, 44% of the pass down snaps. That's where we know he's going to butter his bread, is Samaje Perine, that kind of McKinnon role. Annoyingly, we did see Pirine get that goal line touchdown as well. So it is a little bit of a mismatch, a little messy here. But like just last year, we had Kareem Hunt score 9 touchdowns, was 12th in the league there. It's not something he cannot do by any means. It just happened in that game flow that Samaje Perine was in there to cap off the drive. But the Athletics' Nate Taylor did say Hunt has endeared himself to this organization. During his visit, he demonstrated appropriate accountability about his mistakes in his career, and the team is now ready to welcome him back. And again, we saw that. You kind of know with Andy Reid, he just loves and trusts the guys that he can lean upon from the past. He has the system down. It took 1 week. There's speculation it's going to take multiple weeks for Kareem Hunt to get his legs under him. Nope. And he just looked, again, very, very solid in my opinion. And a lot of people, but the CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is about to come back. Have we watched the same Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the last 3 years? Why would I be overly concerned about this guy coming back if he does at all? I hope his mental health, everything is working out well for him. I'd love for him to rejoin the NFL. Great. That'd be amazing to see. But ultimately, physically, the guy hasn't done anything in so long. I am not worried. I do think this would be Kareem Hunt's job until otherwise stated. Now, we do know Isaiah Pacheco, the latest from Ian Rappaport rap sheet over there, did say weeks 9 to 12 is the speculation that he could be back. There was a point in time where it seemed like it might be a season ender for Pacheco. Now, that does ultimately cap how much I'm willing to spend on Kareem Hunt. I'd still, if I'm running back needy, I'm waiting on CMC. I got multiple buys. I got all these injuries racking up at the position. I'd pay 30-ish% of my budget, maybe even 40 to 50, depending on how desperate that number is. Because I think for at least these next 4 to 6 weeks, however long you're going to get till Pacheco comes back, I think we're going to get about a 60% or so touch share for Kareem Hunt in the more explosive offense in the league. I know it hasn't been the high-flying Chiefs we're used to, but they're going to continue to drive this ball better than most teams in the league. And so I really think if you can get that starting running back here, Kareem Hunt, for one of the better offenses in the league, you got to go for it. If you miss on him, another guy out there in nearly 70% of leagues is Alexander Mattison, 32% rostered right now. And you look at his production versus Xavier White. I thought this was one of the crazier stats I found while digging into this week's waiver wire. 27 opportunities so far in terms of carries and targets for Mattison compared to 56 for Xavier White. So Xavier has more than doubled the usage of Alexander Mattison. And what has that resulted in? Mattison has outperformed Xavier White in every single week, 4 out of 4 times so far, despite seeing less than half of the touches. Shockingly efficient. I don't know where this is coming from for Alexander Mattison. I was never really Mattison fan. Certainly last year, fading him was a good call. But right now, he's 11th in fantasy points over expectation. He's 8th in touchdowns in the league. Xavier White, meanwhile, hasn't scored a touchdown and is 113th in fantasy points above expectation. He's abysmal with the usage. He's getting 5.1 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns for Mattison, 3.1 per carry, and no touchdowns for Xavier. It's like it's flipped whatever I would have expected this to play out. Xavier has not been explosive, has not racked up any touches, and we've called him a fade, and I ultimately think he is ready to get cut. We'll talk about the cut list in a little bit, but just one last feather in this cap, Antonio Pierce saying Madison's recent quality of play has earned him more work and that he's going to get it. And we've seen with Pierce, he is a pretty straight shooter. He says what he needs. He's going to make business decisions, and he sits to Devontae Adams and Max Crosby. I do imagine we could see as early as this week Madison not only playing a lot, but starting and getting the full featured workload moving forward just because of how much better he's been. Maybe even Dylan Labe in deep, deep leagues worth a speculative ad. I still think that kid is going to get in at some point and show more juice than either of these guys. But for the time being, Madison has proven very, very worthy. I kind of poo-pooed him, and I think he deserves a lot more respect than I have been putting on his name in this Raiders uniform so far. Next running back I would consider adding is Tank Bigsby. Now, whereas those first two guys, I'd be willing to bid. Again, Kareem Hunt, 30%, Madison, 15 to 25% or so. You can kind of toss either of those guys into your lineup right away. Bigsby is a handcuff with benefits. You could start him if you're desperate. Kind of like a poor man's Bucky Irving in my eyes, the way we can look at him, because he's outplaying the starter. He could potentially even overthrow the starter. This is just a less explosive overall offense and scheme for him. So the high-end upside, even if he does take over, isn't quite what Irving's is, but it's a similar type of narrative we could string together for Tank Bigsby, who's looked really, really good. He's been really only healthy for 2 weeks, week 1 and week 4. And in those games, 32% of the snaps, 39% of the rush attempts, and he's just looked really, really solid, explosive, cutting from one side of the field to the next and outrunning the defense. Just a different guy than what we saw last year, the guy that we kind of expected out of college based on the film we had seen. It's really coming to fruition at this point. He averaged 12.9 yards per carry last week, taking 7 totes to 90 yards. And just ultimately, he had 29% of his runs going for 10 or more yards compared to 0 for Travis Etienne. We saw 2 carries inside the 5 for Bigsby, 0 for Travis Etienne. It just seems like there's a little bit of a changing of the guard, maybe not a starting role, maybe not even the majority of the work share, but we're certainly seeing Bigsby become closer to a 40 to maybe even 50% of the workload type of guy here and just looking significantly better. 8.2 yards per pop on the season compared to 4.6 for Travis Etienne, who's dealing with a shoulder injury. Maybe that's part of the reason, but he's also just not looked good all year. Remember, we did call Etienne one of our biggest busts, one of our biggest fades of the year, and it was because we thought Bigsby could be more involved. But I didn't expect Bigsby to look this good or Etienne to look this bad. It's looking even better than I would have probably expected at this point. And I think Bigsby is, again, like that Bucky Irving poor man's version. Not as exciting, and even in the best case, whether it's an injury, whether he outplays him and takes over the starting role, he won't hit the ceiling that Irving can hit in that Bucs offense. But still, really, really impressive play from Tank Bigsby. You can see at minimum a goal line role becoming much more frequent. I'm on the fence, though. I might even prefer to add Justice Hill, who's only 15% rostered, just because there's also handcuff with benefit upside here. And we're seeing some really nice production, 51, 53, 40, and then the season low, 35% of the snaps this last week. But either way, definitely involved in each and every game plan, no matter what. And despite the season low in snap share, a season high and team high 33% target share for Justice Hill this past week. He has 16% of the targets on the season, second on the team with that number. He's now put up 11.5, 5.2, 7.4, and then 21.6 PPR fantasy points. Was the running back 8 last week was Justice Hill, racking up 4 carries for 18 yards and then 6 targets, catches all 6 of them for 78 yards and a touchdown. And that's not really a fluke. Oh, it's one big game. He had 8 targets in week 1, too. This is certainly a carved-out role. The team gave him a 2-year, $3 million contract, or $6 million, $3 million a year, rather, for Justice Hill. That's good money for a running back in today's NFL. They really like this guy, and he's been right around a 40% player and a really, really key part of the passing game so far. I think he's looked really solid. He's now the running back 24 in PPR fantasy right now, a top 24, a running back 2, based on the numbers he's put up, 6th in total targets among running backs, 3rd in receiving yards at the position. It's a clear-cut, really valuable role here. Plus, if anything does happen to Derrick Henry, yeah, the team would make some moves. I'm sure they'd add another body or 2. But ultimately, I think Justice Hill would be the lead back. And we saw him last year have multi-touchdown days, have some monster spikes. There's some huge upside here to Justice Hill, and the role he already has is, if you're in a pinch, certainly start worthy in those desperate situations as we're hitting these bye weeks here. And another guy of a similar mold there, someone we also talked about last week, is Emmanuel Wilson. Now, he's up to 14% rostered, more than the 2% we saw last week, but still out there in the majority of leagues, and we're seeing a positive trend. Now, the fantasy production this week wasn't so great, but he had a season-high 44% of the rushing share. You look over the last 2 games, 56% of the snaps for Jacobs, 41% for Wilson. 41% of the rushes to Jacobs, 36% to Wilson. That's a very small gap here. And then 47% of routes went to Jacobs, where 26% went to Wilson. This is like a 2/3, not even, almost a 50-50 situation right now. And that's what LaFleur has always done. Don't forget, it wasn't that long ago that Matt LaFleur was putting Derrick Henry in a committee with Dion Lewis. It's just how the man operates. And so we can expect Emmanuel Wilson, who's had some explosive plays throughout the season. He's 4th in missed tackles forced per touch on the year right now. This guy has 4.45 40 speed at 230-ish pounds. He racked up 42% of his college touchdowns and yards, a 94th percentile on that dominator rating. I know it was a small school, Fort Valley State, but still, you saw the guy just feast upon the competition he was given. And this is a great line, a great zone scheme. You saw with Jordan Love, they are clearly a top 10, if not top 3 offense in the league right now. You got huge handcuff upside alone there, plus about a 40% slice of this invaluable backfield pie, no matter what happens. I think Emmanuel Wilson should be at least 70% rostered right now, a guy I'm going out of my way to go get. Last 2 or 3 running back notes here are Roschon Johnson, 27% rostered. He came off, week 3, a nice 12-touch, 4-catch, 62-yard day, running back 27, looking solid. How does he follow it up? Well, Swift has his best day by a mile as a Bear, 29.5 PPR points, the running back 3 on the week, 67% of the snaps, up from the 50% he saw the week before. Roschon took the backseat. Now, he still did score a touchdown, still did tally 8.6 fantasy points. Was the running back 31? Not bad. But ultimately, it just Swift does look like he's back from the dead, and it caps the ceiling for Roschon. Nonetheless, though, 3 out of the 4 weeks, we've seen Swift look like a garbage bag. And so it wouldn't be all that shocking if this was a real outlier for Swift. Maybe he did turn the corner. Maybe they found what works for him, and he's just going to be much better moving forward. Probably more likely is the Swift that we saw that we thought was borderline cuttable in fantasy these last couple of weeks. And then Roschon still could get that role elevated. Still a guy I'm willing to stash, a talent that I believe in here, despite hating that line overall. And then the last running back, and maybe the most usable, though, in terms of an immediate plug-and-play, that is Trey Sermon. We had Jonathan Taylor suffer a mild high ankle sprain, which I have no clue what that means. High ankle sprains usually are not mild. So either high ankle sprains, it usually takes at least 3 to 4 weeks to come back. And oftentimes you don't ever fully come back for real. But maybe it is just a mild version. Who knows? It does seem like he might miss at least a game or 2. And so far this year, Trey Sermon is the only other running back on the Colts to log a carry on the season. He's been the clear number 2. They do have Tyler Goodson, 190-pound scat back. But to me, Sermon seems like he'd be in line for what we just saw Zach Moss last year really feast upon. He got fed. We saw Moss putting up 90% snap shares and 80% workload totals. And I really think Sermon would be in line for that, given again, Tyler Goodson's the only other back right now on this roster. And we look at the schedule, Jacksonville coming up, even if it's just one game, 20 carries against Jacksonville, even if you are just Trey Sermon, who's horrible, 5 carries, 8 yards this last weekend, like it's not going to be pretty, but I think this guy could definitely get in the end zone, rack up 50 to 60-ish yards on his 20 carries, which again, I know again is abysmal. We're not excited about this talent, but it's volume in a good spot. And then next week, Tennessee, Miami the week after that. We got 3 straight good matchups. It's a good string of games. So however long Taylor's set to miss, if at all, we're going to get a Zach Moss role for a much less exciting player in Trey Sermon, but volume and good matchups is kind of all you need for a top 24 or so formula at the running back position. It would not shock me at all if Trey Sermon has himself some big days. And that wraps up the running back position. My man, Ethan, I'm just seeing right now, you tossed a super chat. I know it's about 3 minutes after what you sent. I'm sorry about the delay on that. We don't have, I didn't send it to Campanelli, so my moderator's not here to let me know that that's there. Thank you so much for your patience, but we will turn our attention to your super chat, let you cut the line before we then turn our attention to the wide receiver position. Fields or Daniels this week. Also, thank you for the free content. Well, hey, not free anymore. You gave me the $5. It's so greatly appreciated. Again, supporting your boy here, Ethan. I know you've consistently tossed those super chats, so thank you again. I think it's got to be Daniels, though. At this point, how do you bench the guy, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy so far, above 20 points in 3 out of 4 games, above 28 fantasy points in 2 out of those 4 games, just looking dynamite, like one of the best rookies to come into the league in quite some time, maybe ever. It's got to be Daniels. And I love Fields. I love the matchup. I think he's going to get pushed. He's probably a top 7 or 8 quarterback himself, but Daniels, I think, is my quarterback 1 or 2. I forget exactly where I have him this week. He's rest of season-wise only behind Josh Allen and Lamar. And honestly, if you wanted to argue he should be above either of those guys, I'd listen. I could be swayed potentially. Field is looking good, but Daniels is next level. So it's got to be Daniels for me. I think he's absolutely far and away the definite play here. So yeah, that's where I lean for sure. Thank you again for this. Somebody did say they can't hear. Can you guys hear me? I just need to turn up my volume. Okay, sorry. I got real worried there. I was like, have I been talking for 22 minutes and nobody could hear me? That would have been a big concern. Glad to know that was not the case. Thank you for correcting yourself. They're like, oh, crap. Like I am in deep here if 22 minutes have gone by and nobody could hear me. So I'm glad that you guys can. We're going to now move our attention to the receivers. We got over 540 of you here already, though. Thank you, said so much. About halfway here. You'll love to see it. I've never hit 1,000 live on the Waiver Wire stream. We've hit it for multiple since start shows now, but man, can we get to over 1,000 on one live stream for the Waiver Wire? Who knows? Love to know if we could, but a thumbs up button if you're live on YouTube, Twitter, that like button, the shares, the retweets. Again, if you enjoy the content, it's a free, easy, but really impactful way to help us out to continue to grow this. 4,100 subscribers has been such a joy to watch those numbers and more people come continued. It's even more of a joy to see you guys showing up week in and week out to be able to get the help. And I appreciate it's humbling that you want to be here. So thank you again. We'd love to continue to grow those numbers, but greatly appreciate all you returning guests. It is so again, so thankful for it. Now, in terms of the wide receiver position, who is the top play to me? It's far and away by a mile, Dontayvion Wicks on the week 5 waiver wire, the number 1 play of any position at this point, and somebody I would pay at least 30%. You know your leagues. You're going to know how much you have to go to. If it took me half my budget, whatever you think it's going to take, probably not every single cent. That's like more of a Braylon Allen after Breece Hall goes down type of move, but I'd say half your budget if you think it's going to take that much and you're wide receiver needy at this point. That's how much I believe in the player of Dontayvion Wicks. It's a risk to do that. We know the guy has not even come close to a 70% route share all year till this last week, and it took an injury for him to get there. And who knows? It was looking like Christian Watson. What is this injury going to be? It could be an IR stint then later it comes out that it might just be one game. That's not going to be nearly as exciting if it's just one game. But let's talk about real quick why, even if it is only one game, I'm extremely excited about Dontayvion Wicks. Per Dwayne McFarland, one of the best follows out there, Wicks has reached a 70% route participation or higher in just 3 games of his early career here. In 2023, week 15, 15.7 fantasy points. 2023, week 18, 24.1 fantasy points. And then this last week in week 4 of 2024, 23.8 fantasy points, averaging over 20 points per game whenever he sees 70% or more of the routes. This past week, given that ankle injury to Christian Watson, 80% of the routes go to Dontayvion Wicks, 24% target share, both leading the team. The guy did have a couple brutal drops, and yet they were down and in the trenches, and they still wanted to go to Wicks time and time again. 13 targets again, pacing the team there compared to 8 for Reed, 9 for Kraft, 8 for Dobbs. 15% target share for Reed and 24% for Wicks. Now, Reed is the guy. I love Reed. He's the one I would take 10 out of 10 times as the number one option here. So damn explosive. But Wicks, he every time he gets used, absolutely thrives. 78 yards, 5 catches, 2 touchdowns, 24 PPR fantasy points. He did drop at least 1 touchdown on the day. It could have been an even bigger day. And that is the risk here. But again, I love that the coach continued to fire him up, continued to dial it up. And we saw Dontayvion Wicks 2 yards per route run as a rookie. Above that, only 26 players since 2011 have achieved that, according to JJ Zacharyson. And that list is like A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, the elite of the elite. Very few of the guys on that list to have 2 or more yards per route run as a rookie don't actually pan out huge. And we also see that the targets per route run as absolutely massive. He's played 395 routes, and he leads the team with 24% targets per route run compared to 17% for Jaden Reed, 16% for Romeo Dobbs, and 10% for Tucker Kraft. So the man can earn targets, and he can do a ton of damage with them, can Dontayvion Wicks. And so again, the upside depends on how long we have Watson out here, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's even just a game. Wicks comes out here and has a monster banger of a day. He could really supplant Watson, who's done absolutely nothing so far this year. Cannot earn targets, cannot separate. He's so explosive as a rookie. There's definitely upside to him, you'd think. But Wicks has just done so much more every time he's been out on the field than Watson. We already saw Wicks trending into those snaps, 40%, then 45%. And then, of course, again, 80% when the injury did strike. You look at the schedule coming up. The Rams, what's more juicy than the Rams? As great of a matchup as you can ask for. Arizona, Houston, Jacksonville, Detroit, and then the bye. All 5 of those games, none of those teams are scary at all. In fact, all of them are 13th or more generous in terms of adjusted, and 4 out of the 5 are in the top 8 in terms of most points allowed to wide receivers. So I think he's just getting cooking. This guy is so talented. I'm very excited to see what he does. He's, again, Dontayvion Wicks, the number 1 waiver ad of week 5, worth 30, 50, whatever percent you think is going to get it done, especially if you need a wide receiver. I think this guy is the real deal and could settle into a every week wide receiver too. And you just don't find that on the waiver wire more than once or twice a season. It's usually in week 1. At this point, you got to go for it. This is the type of dice roll that I think you got to go for. Now, not far behind him, as I said, this is a very exciting week on the waiver wire. Xavier Legette. Dontayvion Wicks might be my number 1 ad, but not too far behind is Xavier Legette. Very exciting rookie prospect. Comes in here, and his first game really, truly without Adam Thielen absolutely shows up. Well, one, Andy Dalton, I think, is this year's Joe Flacco. We saw how Flacco last year inflated the stats of David Njoku, Amari Cooper when he took over for the Browns. And we're seeing it with Andy Dalton, with Deontay Johnson skyrocketing. But Xavier Legette isn't too far behind. He posts a season-high 88% of the routes, 24% of the targets, and racks up 19.6 PPR fantasy points. 10 targets, 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. And why not 2 carries for 10 yards as well? And that kind of fits what we saw from Dave Canales this preseason, saying Xavier Legette, quote, he's a massive receiver, explosive ability, make things happen on short patches, stretch the field and go get it. Wide open, how quickly he can really assimilate himself to this offense and pick it up. We'll even use him in the backfield. And that's what we're seeing. They're doing a very, very just multi-dimensional role for this incredibly explosive yak monster from college. I get all the late year breakouts and all that, but we're seeing it right now in college. And anytime you see this like kind of young unknown upside that has the backbone of being a very productive in the SEC type of prospect, you got to be aggressive and go after it. And I know next week it's one of those guys where he gets Chicago, 3rd toughest matchup. Not the ideal, like pick him up and plug him right in your lineup type of guy, but if you need him, you need him. It's not like you can't. Tutu Atwell just had 80 yards against that team. But then right after Atlanta and then Washington 3 weeks down the road, and unlike Dontayvion Wicks, we know Thielen's going to be out for at least the next 4 weeks, and it wouldn't be shocking at all if we just see Xavier Legette kind of kick Thielen to the curb at this point as the young prospect. They want to continue to get more and more reps. So a smashing true debut here for Xavier Legette, and a guy I would get aggressive, 15, 20 or so percent of your budget. He's probably out there in your leagues at only 14% rostered. Go ahead, go get this guy. There might be a few safer options, even more so than him, though. Wan'Dale Robinson being one of those at wide receiver, a 28% target share on this little of the year right now. That is top 10 in the NFL. He is Wan'Dale, the wide receiver 9 in expected fantasy points, and wide receiver 20 in actual PPR fantasy points. It definitely goes down when you get to half, and certainly borderline useless in standard leagues. It's just a PPR scam, though. We saw in week 4, 36.8% target share, 18 PPR fantasy points. And yet the yards per target, 118 out of 140 wide receivers. It's a PPR scam at the fullest, but it works. 4.8 average up to target. That's not if we're going to win you leagues. But as a locked-in wide receiver 3 in PPR, and even half PPR, he's getting you 12-ish points. Anything above 20% target share should never be out there on the waiver wire. And we see Robinson out there 27% of the time. We also have Neighbors. He has the concussion right now, and I think ultimately that would actually hurt right now Wan'Dale Robinson, who's benefiting greatly from the middle of the field being open, those shorter routes. When you have a guy like Neighbors drawing the defense back and getting the respect of those safeties, it does make Wan'Dale's job so much easier. So if Neighbors does get ruled out with this concussion, I actually think it will hurt Robinson rather than help him, even if you'd think the volume would be so much better. I think he'd be struggling significantly to get open. So we'll see how that all plays out. But definitely a guy, again, Daniel Jones has all eyes for him. He loves to use Robinson to move the chains, and somebody I'd look for. But not too far away from him is Josh Downs, who is the higher upside guy. If you want a bench stash, you don't need to start someone right away. I think Downs is significantly more talented right now than Wan'Dale Robinson, and he can certainly offer more upside and long-term ceiling. 29% and 33% target share the past 2 weeks for Josh Downs. 22 fantasy points this last week out, wide receiver 8 on the week. The caveat is it was because of Joe Flacco. 20.1 of those fantasy points of the 22 points came after Flacco took over. Downs had a 33% target share with Joe Flacco. It seems very much so that he's going to be dependent on if A-Rich plays or does not play. And we don't know right now what that status for the hip injury is with Anthony Richardson. Been labeled day-to-day. It would seem to suggest he'll probably be back this week. And I have a real hard time starting Downs, at least until I see him and Richardson bake up a little more chemistry. But any week that Joe Flacco's at quarterback, I think Josh Downs could be treated as a top 30, maybe even higher wide receiver asset, as could Michael Pittman, who had a 25% target share with Joe Flacco, but he was already kind of doing some damage there. But you look at the schedule for this team: Jacksonville this week, Tennessee, Miami, Houston, Minnesota, all solid matchups in a row here for Josh Downs. So if we get an extended stretch run, extended look at Joe Flacco, I think you can toss him right in the lineup, and I think he's a good stash until we have that confirmed. And then we got Mr. Mike Williams, the next wide receiver addition. I got two more wide receivers for you, one tight end, and then we will wrap up with some D streamers and a quick cut list on all your questions after that. Mike Williams, 21% rostered right now. Starting to ramp it up, though. He's got 1, then 4, then 5 targets, and this last week, nearly 70% of the routes, 37 to 54 dropbacks he ran a route on, and he led the team with 67 yards, caught 4 of his 5 targets against a really good Denver secondary. He added 21, 22, and 20-yard catches throughout the day here. Really, really looking solid. Like, it's the Mike Williams that we know and love, the guy that has been a top 10 wide receiver in the past, both for fantasy and even like real-life-wise stats. He's had some huge seasons for stretches of those years before he gets hurt. And that's the rub with him. It could probably burn out as fast as you start to trust it. But we have seen Mike Williams really put up some numbers, and it just looks like Garrett Wilson is not jiving with Rodgers at all. And we know Rodgers will freeze out somebody to help the benefit of another one. So I think Mike Williams at 21% roster, we're only going to see him continue to rise. Another guy, I'd spend like 7 to 10%. Really impressive wide receiver targets on this week's waiver wire. The last few here is Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittington. I figure I'd cover both Rams at once. We know Demarcus Robinson isn't the dude. Despite everything going his way in terms of I could now be the number one, he's been the distant third in terms of usage here. He's on the field for every snap. He just doesn't get any targets. Atwell, meanwhile, has been the main guy, 13.3 and 12.2 fantasy points the past 2 weeks, a 21% target share, a 91% route participation across those 2 games. And the big thing is they're using Atwell in motion, over 50% of his routes. So that way you can't get your number one guy on him. They're getting him kind of moving in motion, and then he's kind of already getting up to full gear. That's how you got to use your 170-pound dudes, and it's great to see from Sean McVay. You know he's going to use his talent the right way, and he's absolutely letting Atwell do his thing. Most recently, 6 targets, 4 catches, 82 yards to lead the team. But it is worth mentioning Jordan Whittington actually had a higher route share with 97%, a higher target share with 26%. And this is kind of that Puka Cup role a lot of people were projecting, and myself included, for last week, or 2 weeks ago, rather. Well, we didn't see it then, but 2 weeks later, this past week, we do see it here. 6 of 8 targets get hauled in for 62 yards. One of those PPR type roles where it was layup target after layup target. The guy can block out the building. They use him on end arounds and screens. I'm a really big fan of Whittington now. We had a great matchup coming in this week, and then ultimately they have the bye week in week 6. So it might be 1 week rentals for both Tutu Atwell and Whittington, which is why I compare to some of these other guys. I'm not going to go up to 10%, maybe 2, 3, 5. Maybe you don't have to put anything on them. Maybe you just kind of toss in your waiver and see if you get them. But I do think both these guys will be nice streams here in this coming week. A guy that does maybe have a little more long-term juice, and the last wide receiver we'll cover here is Trey Tucker, 9% rostered right now. To me, it seems like a matter of when, not if, that Adams is going to get dealt. This hammy thing feels really flukish. It seems like I don't want to play for the Raiders, so I'm going to have a hamstring injury until I get traded. And then it's a kind of the Kevin Nash gets out of the wheelchair gif. Like suddenly I'm on the 49ers and let me just get out of the wheelchair. I'm not injured at all type of situation. Nonetheless, it does seem like Trey Tucker is going to become a full-time player moving forward. And so far this year in a full-time role, you look at week 3, 88% of the routes, 81% of snaps, 9 targets, 7 catches, 96 and a touchdown, 22.6 fantasy points. Then the next week, 6 targets, 5 catches, 41 yards and a rushing touchdown, 15.4 fantasy points. And so he's been really solid, top 25 in back-to-back weeks, wide receiver 8 even in that week 3 blow-up game. I know he's tiny, 5'9", 187 pounds, a little thick though for that shorter stature here. 4.40, 92nd percentile though, burning deep speed, and just a baller. One of those guys that when he gets out there, he always seems to show up. Antonio Pierce loves him, raves about him. I'm a big fan too, and they do get the ball in his hands in very creative ways. So I do think Trey Tucker worth a solid 5 to 8% if he is out there in your leagues. Alrighty, Wolfpack, we are going to plow forward here, get to the tight ends, the defensive streamers, the cut list, and on to all of your questions. I only have one tight end, so it's going to go real quick, but we're almost at 700 already. Another plea, I like to in between each position. I know it's annoying, but it's because it helps us out so much. The like button, the thumbs up, wherever you're watching from, or if you're catching the replay, thank you again so much. I really appreciate you being here, and it would be so, so kind of you if you consider tossing that thumbs up button here and helping your boy out. Let's move forward, though. There is only one tight end I think worth a pickup this week, and that is Mr. Tucker Kraft. A phenomenal game out of this guy. 17% target share, but the biggest thing is jumping from a 60-ish, 70% route range all year to an 86%. That is an elite rate of routes for a tight end. Scores a phenomenal touchdown, breaking a ton of tackles, looking just faster than he's ever looked before. 9 targets, 6 catches, 53 and a touchdown. The number 1 tight end score of the week in week 4 here. He's currently the tight end 7 in fantasy, and we've already seen, I think Jordan Love at the helms here. This is a number 3 at worst offense, in my opinion. They are going to be able to push the pace, and I think Tucker Kraft is so clear, far and ahead Luke Musgrave. As I said and predicted in the beginning of the offseason, I thought Tucker Kraft was the guy they truly, truly wanted to get the rock more and more, and I think he's going to be the breakout tight end of the season, that kind of Jake Ferguson. He's only going to continue to get elevated. The only thing that was holding him back was that type of committee situation. But again, 86% of the routes. See you later, Luke Musgrave. This is the Tucker Kraft show, a dominant type of share in a great offense. What more could you ask for at tight end? I would not be shocked at all to see him be a top 7 tight end moving forward here the rest of the way. All right, Wolfpack, that wraps up all the players I wanted to cover. Real quick, let me get a quick swig of water. And we will move on to the Week 5 defensive streamers. Who are the best pickups in the leagues right now? And to me, my actual number one defense of the week, not just streamer, number one ranked defense is the Denver Broncos. They're out there in nearly every league, only 19% rostered on Yahoo, and I think they should be the priority here. They are quietly the number 4 defense on the year right now in total fantasy points, and they actually have more fantasy points scored, 28 total, than real points allowed, 16 over their past 2 games. They are just shutting down teams. They genuinely just good defense. We know the secondary is phenomenal, and Pat Surtain may be the best corner in the league and lots of talent around him. The run D has been absolutely stifling this year compared to last year, too. They are top 5 in EPA allowed in terms of very few APAs allowed throughout the games. They've been a top 10 fantasy defense in 3 out of 4 games. This is their totals: 10, 6, 15, 11. No real duds and all very solid production. And they have faced some decent offenses in Seattle, Tampa Bay, the Jets. They've just been flat out good. And now you get the Raiders, who have given up the 5th most points to opposing defenses, 14 sacks, 6 turnovers allowed on the season. I think that this is going to be a phenomenal spot at home in a game with an over-under that's below 37. I love it. I'm a huge fan of the Denver defense, and I think another 15-ish point effort is very much in the realm of possibility. Now, I also really like the Seahawks this week, too. They're 12th in total fantasy points so far. They've really feasted upon weaker competition, though. We saw them kind of be fraudulent there against the Lions, get blown out. Not even blown out. They played real tight, but the defense got the doors blown off them last night. But you look at when they faced Denver, New England, Miami, those were all really impressive totals. They had 11 total sacks, 3 turnovers, and averaged 11 points per game when facing those 3. And the reason I bring that up is because they get the Giants, the 6th most generous team to fantasy defenses. They're scoring 15 points per game, rushing only for 85 yards per game. Both those are 30th in the league. We know the Giants are not a good offense. They do have the dangerous threat of Malik Neighbors, but other than that, this is not a good team. So as long as Seattle can show up and kind of do what they've done against weaker opponents, I think it would be a smash week. Now, the only buyer beware situation here, though, is the Giants have they had a horrible week 1. 22 fantasy points were surrendered to the team they faced. But then since then, they've only allowed 4, 6, and 4 fantasy points to the teams they face. So it could be the fool's gold of the week, but I do think Seattle Seahawks make a great pickup. They're still a top 5 defense for me this week. New England, though, this is a great week for D-streamers as well. 5% rostered. They've done nothing as a unit since week 1. They had that huge upset on the road against Cincy. Defense put up 11 fantasy points, and then they've just been abysmal. But they get a Dolphins team coming to Gillette Stadium, to their home turf here. 3rd most points allowed to defenses, 11.25 points per game. And since losing Tua, they've given up 18, 13, and 10 fantasy points on the season. And I know this team, the Pats, it's not great, but this Dolphins team has scored 10, 3, and 12 points and allowed at least 2 sacks in those last 3 games. So minimal scoring and at least 2 sacks a game. This is a slot fest written all over it type of game. I think New England can run. They can then get the ball to the defense and let them just do their thing, tee off against Tyler Huntley, who, another week would probably look better in this scheme, but not anything I'm scared of. And then my last guy on this list, my last defense that you could consider streaming, but I'm going in the order I would rank them, as just to make sure that's clear, is Indy, 14% rostered. They've been really strong. They've averaged 11 fantasy points across their last 2 weeks. They have 8 sacks and 5 turnovers in those last 2 games. And we saw this last year. They had these hot streaks where they were the number 1 defense from week 4 to week 10. They were just racking up 15 to plus point days. They now have 4 sacks in 3 out of 4 games, and the Jags are surrendering 3.3 sacks per game. Seems like a perfect marriage of the skills of this defense and the faults and flaws of the offense they're facing. Trevor Lawrence, 32nd in completion rate, 22nd in pass yards, 26th in passer rating. He is just awful. He hasn't turned the ball over a ton, which I know is what you're looking for a fantasy defense. But 0-4, they're going to be desperate, and I think this defense is just going to tee off them. All the talk is they are rudderless right now, is what the Jordan Schultz quote was. They do not have – they're quitting. Every week you see the Jags quit. They're pathetic. I think they are great. But again, I would go Broncos, Seahawks, Colts, Pats. They're kind of at the bottom of that. But I would go Pats over the Colts if I had to pick between them. And now the last segment here till we get to your questions, Wolfpack, is the cut list. And I'm just going to remind you, who was on this for me last week is Mark Andrews. What did you do this week? A donut, a complete French Cruella right in the face. Yet another horrible week. I advised you guys to cut him last week. Got a lot of comments that I was being impulsive, that this is Mark Andrews. Have patience. I don't know if you guys are going to still feel that way again. He's been back-to-back weeks under 50% of the routes, back-to-back goose eggs. I think you got to send a message to your fantasy locker room that, yes, he was a fifth-round pick. No, he is not performing. When was the last time a fifth-round pick had back-to-back true duds? Not even a target. It is just abysmal to watch this guy play. Send the message, cut him, get him off the roster. You will feel better. It will make you feel cathartic. Just get the cut in there. I know it's tight end. There's nothing out there. What are you going to cut him for? Something better than a zero, I promise you. Tucker Kraft, easy. Give me Tucker Kraft over Mark Andrews 10 out of 10 times the rest of the year. And as alluded to with the Alexander Mattison pickup, you absolutely can get rid of Xavier White, who's still somehow 80% plus rostered across all types of formats. But a reminder, Alexander Mattison has seen less than half the work of Xavier White, 27 opportunities to 56 opportunities. And Alexander Mattison has outscored him every single week of the year so far. 5.1 yards per pop and 3 touchdowns for Mattison, 3.1 yards per pop and no touchdowns, plus some fumbles for Xavier White, which has led Antonio Pierce to say Madison's quality of play is going to earn him more work. He's going to get it. I think that's obviously going to come at the expense of Xavier White, who is very cuttable at this point, as is Carson Steele. The guy fumbles it, and we don't see from him again. I would not be shocked if he has his last career carry as a Chief here. 19% of the snaps, fumbles the second time in 3 games. They just hand the keys on over to Kareem Hunt. Trustworthy. We know what we can get. Dependable. Carson Steele, no matter how much you bid on the guy, don't let it be a sunk cost fallacy. He's just going to burn a hole in your roster the rest of the way. Now, a trickier cut for me is Quentin Johnston. And I don't think you have to cut him. But if you're desperate right now, I have a league where I need to cut somebody for a quarterback, and I really don't want to cut Bucky Irving. I don't want to cut Braylon Allen. I don't want to cut Ladd McConkey. So I'm going to cut his teammate, Quentin Johnston, here because of that week 5 bye here. This is a run-heavy offense, and when they throw, it's very clear to me Ladd is going to be that week to week. Every single time the volume's getting better. He's looking phenomenal. He's going to be the move the chain. Like, you can actually start this guy in this offense, whereas Quentin Johnston, he's played well. Again, if I have the space, I don't have to cut this guy. But if you need to make a move, he's been very, very touchdown dependent so far this year. So I do think Quentin Johnston is going to continue to get phased out for Ladd McConkey. He's still going to have some big weeks. He's still going to score some touchdowns. Definitely looks better than he's looked his entire NFL career, which there's really nowhere to go but up. I like what I'm seeing from Johnston, but it's, again, those bye week crunches. If you've got to make a decision, and it's like him versus like a Keon Coleman who hasn't truly emerged but still has a little untapped potential, I'd probably lean cutting Quentin Johnston. I think it's going to be tough to trust this guy moving forward. And last but shouldn't be least, Dalton Schultz. He's scored 3, 3, 2, and 4.9 points on the season. No Tank Dell. Everybody expecting the spike week for Dalton Schultz, and no. This offense has not been nearly as prolific as we had expected. They're winning games. They're doing fine. Stroud is clutch, all that, but none of it's going to Dalton Schultz. So get rid of the guy, cut him. Again, Tucker Kraft every single time here over them. All righty, Wolfpack. We are now approaching 800-775. Thank you so much. It is time for the mailbag, but thank you again so much for being here. Let me get a quick swig of water, and while I do, if you like what you're hearing, that thumbs up button, YouTube, to Twitter, wherever you're at, the shares, the retweets, helping this channel grow is so greatly appreciated. Thank you again so much for being here. And of course, if you're new, we'd love to have you sub as we make the climb to 5K. Can we get there in a year? We will find out. All righty. My man Bulldog saying, let's go, Wolfpack, let's go indeed. And then asking, is it time to dump Kyle Pitts for Tucker Kraft? Shame on me for drafting him. Shame on you indeed. I did kind of. So I'll say this. I've really never been on the Kyle Pitts train, and obviously it hasn't really hurt me since his rookie year, and even then it wasn't that good. And this year I did kind of get the, okay, Zach Robinson's here, Kirk Cousins here, a better play caller, better QB. Like, that's all he really needed. And it's very clear that's not the case. I just don't think Pitts is good. It's come down to the fact that he was an athletic freak. It was Calvin Johnson at tight end and all the hype that this guy's got. But he has no more excuses. Not that Cousins has been great. Not that Robinson's been great. But like, are we going to continue to blame everybody but Kyle Pitts? No, the guy is nothing. We're seeing Drake London. We're seeing Darnell Mooney get quality production here. Pitts is done. I would absolutely cut Kyle Pitts for Tucker Kraft, Bulldog. 10 out of 10 times. Get him off. He's similar, not quite as bad as Mark Andrews, I guess, at this point, but send the locker room a message. You don't need a soft guy like Kyle Pitts taking up roster space here. William, Wicks worth number 3 priority. Would then have Nico, Neighbors, Higgins, Worthy, and Wicks as my receivers. I mean, this is a tricky situation because your receivers are so good. Like, are you actually going to ever use Wicks? Probably not. And so now at 3, you got a good shot to kind of bump yourself up to number 1 if there is a running back injury or something of that nature. But that being said, in general, yes, I do think Wicks is well worth a number 3 priority. If you just want to get a good quality player on your team, like, go for it. Absolutely. But it just depends on, like, if your running backs are truly needy and you'd rather kind of take that and then let yourself continue to bump up. It's just this is why I love FAAB and not going with the priorities, because you can get yourself into that constant cycle of like, nah, not going to pick a guy up, going to wait till something bigger comes along, and then nothing bigger ever comes along. You're just like, damn, I wish I could have had Wicks, who ended up being just as good as Worthy by the season's end type of situation, you know? So very tricky there. And again, I think Fantasy Ice, we figured that out, that your volume was down. So I'm glad that got figured out there. Trade Worthy, Higgins, and Chase Brown for Devontae Adams and Christian Kirk. This is a tricky one where I think I probably would do this, yes. But, like, we don't know what Adams' deal is and when he's going to come back and what team he's going to be playing for. The off chance he goes to the Chiefs, like, you just hit a home run. Are they really going to do interdivisional crime there? I don't know if the Raiders would actually do that. But in a vacuum, I look at this, I'm like, I see Worthy, the elevation going up and the role getting better. And yeah, that's great. But, like, Adams, we know what Adams is when he's out there. It's going to be a stud. But a lot of this is contingent on Adams going somewhere else, you know, getting motivated again. And so it's a risk-reward type of situation. And you see Chase Brown and Worthy kind of ascending here too. It really depends on what your depth is, but I also see Kirk kind of ascending a little bit, but no Ingram, so maybe that's part of why he's going up. It's so hard to assess this, William, when we don't know what Adams' outlook is going to be. I really think it comes down to what you need there. Don't drop Ridley for Wicks, but I'd find room for Wicks. Oh, so I was wondering what – I didn't even see this question. Drop Ridley for Wicks. I don't think I've dropped Ridley yet either. I don't want to quit on him, but, man, we've only had one good week on the year. And so if you have nobody else to cut, like rest of season, who would I rather have? I'd want to say it's Ridley. If there is a chance Hopkins gets moved and then it kind of clears the runway for Ridley to be more steady here. But, like, dating back to last year, too, Ridley had these blowups and then was so tough to trust week in and week out. I have him on my squads. I was expecting Jamar Chase move him around, roll. I know he's not Jamar Chase, but all he needs is to get moved around a bit to get better matchups and get off the press coverage, and it's just not coming to fruition so far. It's early. I don't want to overreact, but, like, Levis doesn't look good either. I think Callahan's the real deal, and Ridley's still not kind of getting the usage. So I'd like to keep Ridley, but, man, if you just are sick of it and you want to give Wicks a role, it's not unjustifiable, but I ideally look elsewhere. Lost Rice, I would have to drop Braylon Allen or Bucky to get Wicks. Lean in Braylon, but thoughts. I have Brees and also Jay Brooks in the IR. That's tricky, Bulldog. If you definitely need some receiver depth, I think you got to do it. And I think I do lean with you that Braylon would be my preferred drop. Because, like, Bucky, so I've gone through the breakdown. It was on a video last week if you want, like, my big breakdown on both these guys, and it kind of still stands true. So go check that clip out, Bulldog. But the quick 5-second summary of it is Bucky Irving has the clearer path to start. He doesn't need an injury. He could just overtake Rachaad White because he's better. He's a better runner, and he's going to continue. We see the role continue to get elevated. Whereas Braylon Allen is great. I think he's the better player of these two guys. And if Brees went down, Braylon Allen has a top 5 ceiling that I just don't think, even if Rachaad White went down, like, the upside for Braylon Allen long-term is higher. But I do think on your situation, like, you already have Brees, it's nice to have an insurance policy, but you're kind of playing it safe. You're kind of wearing the protection there. And I'd say you roll the dice and you hope that Bucky pans out big. Brees stays the horse here. You got Brooks coming in. I probably would cut Allen, but, yeah, that's a tough one. Should I drop Pitts for Kraft? Robert, yes, absolutely. I think we already had that question, but I am all good with dropping it. Yes, we do want Wicks. We absolutely want Wicks, no doubt about it. Swift or Roschon from the wire? I would prefer Swift. I mean, how can you not after that last game, the explosive effort? I know we had 3 games of garbage bag, but then we see 29.5 points and 70% of the work. Like, it's hard to not go for a Swift there myself. Is Rashid Shaheed a flex-worthy play over Dobbins? I mean, he's got 27% target share on the year, Ethan. Like, he has been very, very viable. I think absolutely you can play him over Dobbins. Now, Dobbins on the bye, so yeah, you toss in Rashid Shaheed. We did see the 0-point game, and so there is a floor here that is almost non-existent. But 3 out of the 4 games have been very nice and consistent. That last week, it was 12 targets for the guy. Like, we're seeing a different role here where, yes, we get the deep looks. And even in the game where he had 0, he had 2 deep balls right there, just barely misconnecting on it. He could have had another monster day. So I love Rashid Shaheed. I prefer Dobbins 1-to-1, but yes, can you play Shaheed over him, especially when he's on bye? Yes, absolutely, you could. No Swift, Roschon, or Chuba from wire. So if these 3 guys are out there, I think Chuba is by far the number 1 ad. You've seen it in back-to-back weeks now with Andy Dalton, a top 12 running back. I know Brooks is coming back, but I think they're going to really ease him in at least another week before he gets activated. So you have at least 1 more week of Chuba being that true guy. So I would rank these Chuba, then Swift, and Roschon for your 3 skits. Dropping Gibson, Pirine, and Chandler. Throw a major fab at Wicks, Bigsby, and Hunt. Thoughts? I think Yoso, Tony, all 3 of those guys are big upgrades to what you're doing. Yeah, this is the week. I think this is a week where a lot of good quality players are going to be added. Jonathan Taylor sits this week. Would you rather pick up and stream Algier or Sermon? So if I have to stream one, it would be Sermon, but normally I would just say Algier 10 out of 10 times would be the preferred pickup here as a stash. He's right along that Bucky, Irving, Braylon Allen. Should the starter, should Bijan get hurt, like Algier is a top 7 running back. We've already seen him go there. So yeah, I am absolutely would rather have Algier on my team. But if it's just a 1 week, I need a streamer, I'll probably be having Sermon higher in my ranking because he's going to be the one getting the volume here. Eric says, go over people you're willing to drop at the end. Yep, that's the cut list. So I went over those 5 names. I hope you stayed for it, but you can always rewind and check that out. Wolfpack, we are now nearly at 900. Maybe we could get 1,000 tonight. I don't know. We'll see. 850, though, is so awesome to see. Another call out, though. If you haven't done, please pay that like tax. Help your boy out. It does help us continue to grow. It is so greatly appreciated. The thumbs up, the like, the shares, the retweets help us continue to pump this out to more people to grow the channel. A lot of new names I'm seeing here in the comments, a lot of repeats, which you'll love to see too. But would love you new folks to subscribe and join us as we keep going. But if I tell you about Juwan Jennings, 88 yards off of 3 catches, 6 targets, and he almost had the 3. I mean, I love him, Smitty. He's not out there in 50% of leagues now. At this point, he'd be long scooped up. But yes, if he's somehow out there in your leagues, like, yeah, of course. I think the guy's a baller. He's like one of the rare handcuffs at wide receiver that I'd love to hold. And honestly, he might be able to start. Maybe is he going to take over for Ayuk? Like, probably not. I think Ayuk's a baller. But I think Jennings is just a bunch of baller. And I see Kyle Shanahan pissed off about this whole Ayuk thing and kind of sending a message here. I love Jennings. I think he is the man. And he's not going to go away. It's tough to trust because he only played, like, he did that on 50% of the routes. And that's like that's the argument there. It's like, all he needs is 50% of the routes. And he can lead the team in receiving and go off. So that's great to see, but it's also like, oh, he's only getting 50% of the routes. Like, are we always going to be able to bank on that? Probably not, but the dude can ball. There's no doubt about it, the Smitty. No doubt about it. Was offered Brian Robinson and Tank Dell for Neighbors, half PPR. Ooh, I'd rather have Neighbors here, William. Like, I love Brian Robinson. Tank Dell, just not doing it this year. I think Neighbors is the clear guy here. If you're getting Neighbors, then pull that trigger 10 out of 10 times. If I can't get Wicks with 3rd priority, should I use it on Sermon? I don't think so. I think Sermon's going to get you like 8 points. He's going to be fine as a fill-in, but like you could get the same thing from Bucky Irving, but have more upside on your team. I don't think it's worth blowing the 3rd for. So we got your squad here. I would prioritize Wicks and then Legette is what I would do, Raul. Should I drop Juwan Jennings for Wicks, Downs, or Trey Tucker? I would for Wicks. I think I do have Wicks higher. The other 2 definitely not. KJ, is there anybody else, though? I do like holding on to Juwan Jennings if I can. Get Kraft for Henry or Schultz. Yes, drop either. I would drop Henry first, then I drop Schultz. I think you can drop either of them. I drop both. Like, Get Kraft and then pick somebody else up. You don't need 2 tight ends. Just go with Kraft. Ah, man. I think Vikings the rest of the season is like they're the best, one of the best defenses, the number 1 defense in the league right now for fantasy. So this week I do have the Broncos higher, but like if it has to come at the expense of cutting the Vikings, I probably don't. Bulldog. Thoughts? Oh, we did have another super chat. Sorry, Tyler Sperry. Again, I don't have my mod here, so I had to force you to wait 2 minutes there. I appreciate your patience here, but let you cut the line here. Would you drop Dell for Wicks if you have Reed? I don't think I would drop Dell for Wicks even if I didn't have Reed, but then it just also gets that much more congested. Because Wicks, again, I'm very intrigued. Do I think he could and probably will win that role here from Christian Watson for however long he fills in? And then, like, does he keep the stranglehold on it? I do. And I think that could be very, very valuable. I think that could be more valuable than Tank Dell. But my worry with him is we have not seen him earn those routes without an injury yet. Like, is Christian Watson going to be out a week and just come right back in, and then you dropped a guy like Dell? Dell, to me, yes, he's going to be tough to trust right now, but if either Diggs or Nico Collins, something happens, like, we know what Dell can do. We saw last year. The guy is unbelievable. So, to me, Wicks, like Dell's a worst case right now. I think it can only go up for him, whereas Wicks is like at his ceiling and is really intriguing, and maybe that ceiling stays. But ultimately, I'd rather have Dell on my roster. And certainly when you have Reed too, like, it's going to be a tough – this is an offense you could double stack, sure, but I'd rather have Dill and hope for a best case there. Whereas Wicks, it does – I love the guy. I think he's a great pickup. I do think he's going to win the job. And if that is the case, yeah, he probably ends up being a little more valuable than Dell the rest of the way, but there's a much bigger risk that he just falls off. Like, Will Watson comes back and kicks him to the curb, either whether you should or not. And I'd rather have Dell, I think, in that case. Thank you again so much, Tyler, for the super chat, though. Thoughts on Ott in the tight end? I mean, 9 targets, 6 catches. That's not nothing at the tight end position. He's just so bad. Like, it's just boring and gross. But, hey, you know, if you're desperate at tight end, you want to cut Mark Andrews for him, like, do it. You know, he's going to get volume. How many QBs would you take over Jane Daniels? I think I mentioned this one, Charlie. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. And honestly, you could convince me that I shouldn't take either of them over Daniels. Like, he's in that same conversation. At worst, he's number 3. Would you drop Charbonnet, Najee Harris for Wandale, Javon? Nope. I'd rather keep Charbs and Najee there. Raul. Is Mostert a drop? I think you can drop him. It's one of those things where it's like, when he comes back, what's he coming back to? Maybe Tua's here, and the offense gets its footing again. And then, yeah, of course, Mostert's worth it. But it obviously comes down to what's out there. But right now, this Miami offense, like, I don't care about any of the running backs. Not even Achane at this point because of how bad they've been. Kraft or Wicks. I mean, that comes down to team need, but, you know, 9 out of 10 times I'm saying Wicks is the far higher upside. But I know how desperate tight end situations are out there. So, you know, it might make sense to go after Kraft instead. So Eric says drop Rice. So I think so, but we still don't have it confirmed that the ACL is torn yet. And that makes me, on the teams where I have Rice, I'm going to wait. It's just make sure. Because I would be devastated if I dropped Rashid and then a report came out that, oh, it's just a bruise. You know, 98% of the time, that's not going to be the case. The on-field testing will tell you what the story is. But there is a chance. And so until I have it officially confirmed, it's ACL, he's done, I'm not cutting the guy. Cut your kicker so that you can wait it out and see how that news develops, and then pick up a kicker later in the week, you know? Drop your defense. Don't drop Rice until we fully know that he's gone. Rashid or Wicks? I'd rather have Rashid Shaheed, and I love Wicks, but I'd rather have Rashid Shaheed. It's the consensus on Wicks or Hunt. I have first priority. Again, that comes down to team need. I think Wicks is the more talented, higher upside player, especially with Pacheco back in week 9 to 12. But again, if you are desperate at running back, you need to fill the hole, then you got to go for Hunt. But I do think they're in the same tier at the top. I do have Wicks higher, though, if all things are equal. Drop Miami D. I'd go for Denver Giuseppe. Just rewind and watch the defensive streamers. Thank you, Will. Appreciate your kind words, buddy. I appreciate you being here. Tucker or Whittington for a stash? Probably Tucker. Whittington's a nice stream, but eventually Puka and Kupp come back, and I just don't think there's much for him. Giuseppe's got the top 2 of the top 3 guys. You got to trade something there, Giuseppe. Maybe ride the high of Daniels, get the elite value for him or something like that. Drop likely for Kraft. You already have Ferguson, do you really need a second tight end then? Ferguson's one of the few dependable guys, right? Like, I mean, I love Kraft, and I'd rather have Kraft than Likely. So sure, but like, is there a running back stash, Emmanuel Wilson, something like that, where you can maximize the upside here? Gibbs, Stevenson, Mostert, Hill, Braylon. Would you drop anyone for Legette, Whittington, or Watson? Yeah, I mean, I think this is one where I do drop Mostert for Legette. I think Legette's the one that I see on that list and pops to me tunes is where I go. All righty, Wolfpack. That wraps up the hour of the Waiver Wire show. Thank you so much. All of our content at rotostreetjournal.com, my weekly rankings, all of our Waiver Wire recaps, rest of season outlooks, rest of season rankings. You can find that all at rotostreetjournal.com. You can find me at rotostreetwolf on Twitter. One last call as you head out for a thumbs up, a like button, wherever you're watching, Twitter or YouTube. Hit that like, hit the subscribe if you're new around here. We'd love to have you guys continue to add on to the Wolf Pack here. Thank you again so much. Your support is so greatly appreciated. And best of luck. Get after it in week 5 because this is a really good waiver wire. You guys should definitely be digging in. And in a world full of fantasy sheep, guys, be the wolf. rotostreetjournal.com. Check it on out. Later, guys.